The dust-laden Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as Josephine Morgan stood trembling beside the auction block, her hands bound with coarse rope that bit into her wrists. The year was 1878, and her life had crumbled faster than the parched earth beneath her worn boots. The crowd of men, mostly miners, traders, and drifters, gathered in a semicircle, eyeing her like cattle at a market while a broken-down wagon sat neglected beside her, its wheels splintered beyond recognition. $5 for the woman, a voice called out from the back, followed by crude laughter. 10, countered another. Josephine kept her gaze fixed on the horizon, refusing to meet the eyes of the men who now determined her fate. Just 3 weeks ago, she had been traveling west with her uncle after her parents' death from typhoid, only for him to succumb to a heart attack, leaving her alone and vulnerable. The wagon master had seized her few possessions, claiming them as payment for her uncle's outstanding debts, and now she was being sold to cover the rest. $15, called out a man with tobacco-stained teeth. 20, said another, his gaze lingering on her in a way that made her stomach turn. $50. The crowd fell silent, turning to locate the source of the generous bid. A tall man pushed his way forward, his face partially obscured by the brim of a well-worn Stetson. As he approached, Josephine noticed his weathered hands, the confident set of his broad shoulders, and the quiet authority in his stride. $50 for the lady in that broken-down cart, he clarified, nodding toward the wagon beside her. The auctioneer, a portly man with a greasy vest, looked surprised. "The wagon's not part of the deal, mister, that there's just junk." The stranger removed his hat, revealing piercing blue eyes that assessed the situation with cool calculation. $60 for both, then. We will fix both. Sold. The auctioneer's gavel came down with finality, and just like that, Josephine Morgan had a new owner. The stranger approached, and Josephine braced herself, uncertain of what fresh hell awaited her. He stood before her, towering at well over 6 feet, and she noticed the star pinned to his vest. "A lawman, then." "Quinn Rodgers," he said simply, extending his hand before seeming to realize her wrists were still bound. With a frown, he produced a knife and sliced through her restraints. "Sheriff of Silverwood County. I don't believe in human trading, miss." "Morgan," she supplied, rubbing her raw wrists. "Josephine Morgan. Miss Morgan," he continued, "I'm not buying you for servitude. I'm preventing these vultures from doing so. You'll be free to go wherever you wish once we're out of here." Josephine stared at him, disbelief warring with desperate hope. "Why would you help a stranger?" Quinn Rodgers replaced his hat, his expression unreadable. "Because decent folks help each other out here. The West doesn't forgive the weak, but it rewards those who stand together." He gestured toward the broken wagon. "Now, let's get that cart of yours fixed up." As they left the auction, whispers followed them, some curious, others disappointed that the day's entertainment had been cut short. Quinn led Josephine toward a sturdy bay horse tethered nearby. "We'll need to stop by my place first," he explained. "I've got tools there for the wagon repairs, then I can take you to the boarding house in town. Mrs. Reynolds runs a decent place. She might even have work for you if you're looking to stay." Josephine struggled to process this unexpected turn of events. "I don't have money to pay for lodging," she admitted. "Everything I owned was taken." Quinn studied her for a moment. "What skills do you have, Miss Morgan?" "I can read and write well. I taught children back in Illinois before." Her voice faltered as memories of her previous life threatened to overwhelm her. "Silverwood could use a teacher," Quinn remarked. "The mining boom brought families, but education hasn't caught up yet." He helped her mount his horse before climbing up behind her. "For now, let's focus on getting you settled and that wagon fixed." The ride to Quinn's property took them through terrain that showcased the harsh beauty of the Arizona territory. Rocky outcroppings gave way to expanses of sagebrush and cacti standing sentinel against the vast blue sky. After nearly an hour, a modest ranch came into view, a sturdy cabin with a barn and corral. "It's not much," Quinn said as he helped her dismount, "but it's home." "It's wonderful," Josephine replied honestly. After weeks of sleeping under wagon canvas or open sky, the sight of a proper dwelling was like glimpsing paradise. Quinn tied his horse to a post and led Josephine inside. The cabin was simple but clean, with a stone fireplace, a wooden table with 4 chairs, and a separate sleeping area partitioned by a curtain. "You can rest here while I fetch your wagon," Quinn said. "There's water in the pitcher if you're thirsty. I'll be back before sundown." Josephine's hand shot out to catch his sleeve. "Why are you doing this? Truly?" Quinn paused, considering her question. 3 years ago, I came out here with nothing but the clothes on my back and a desperate need to start over. Someone showed me kindness when I needed it most." His eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I'm just passing it along." After Quinn departed, Josephine explored the cabin. Everything was organized with practical efficiency: shelves of preserved food, books stacked neatly on a small desk, tools hanging in precise order on the wall. She found a basin and washed away the grime of captivity, combing her fingers through her long chestnut hair. True to his word, Quinn returned as the sun began its descent, leading his horse, which now pulled her damaged wagon. He had enlisted the help of a young man who rode alongside him. "Miss Morgan, this is Tyler Jenkins," Quinn introduced as they approached. "Best wheelwright in the territory." Tyler tipped his hat respectfully. "Madam, Mr. Jenkins will assess what needs fixing," Quinn explained. "Meanwhile, I've brought some supplies from town. Thought you might appreciate a proper meal." Josephine watched as the men unloaded the wagon and Tyler began examining the broken wheel and axle. Quinn disappeared inside the cabin, and soon the aroma of cooking food wafted through the open door. When Tyler finished his assessment, he approached Josephine, who sat on the porch steps. "It's fixable, madam. The wheel needs replacing entirely and the axle's got a crack, but I can have it done in 3 days' time." "I can't pay you," Josephine admitted. Tyler smiled. "Sheriff Rodgers already settled that matter, said it was official county business helping a stranded traveler." After Tyler departed with promises to return tomorrow, Josephine entered the cabin to find Quinn setting 2 plates on the table. The domestic scene stirred something within her, a longing for normalcy she hadn't felt in months. "You didn't have to do that," she said, gesturing toward the meal of beans, cornbread, and what appeared to be rabbit stew. "A man's got to eat anyway," Quinn replied with a shrug. "Might as well have company." Over dinner, Josephine learned more about Quinn Rodgers. He had come west after the war between the states, seeking purpose after years of conflict had left him hollow. He'd worked as a ranch hand, a deputy, and finally earned his badge as sheriff 2 years ago. "And you?" he asked. "What brought you west?" Josephine stared into her stew. "My parents died last winter. My uncle offered to take me to California, where he had prospects in San Francisco." She swallowed hard. "He died 3 weeks into the journey. The wagon master said I couldn't continue alone, that I needed to pay what my uncle owed, when I couldn't." Her voice trailed off. "That wagon master had no right," Quinn said, his jaw tight with anger. "What he did was illegal." "Laws seem distant out here," Josephine observed. "That's why good people need to enforce them," Quinn replied. He hesitated before adding, "You're welcome to stay until your wagon's fixed. After that, if you decide to remain in Silverwood, I'd be happy to introduce you to folks who might help you get established." That night, Quinn insisted Josephine take his bed while he slept on a bedroll near the fireplace. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her as she processed the day's events and wondered what tomorrow would bring. The next morning, Josephine woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of hammering. She dressed quickly in her one remaining dress, dusty and wrinkled from her ordeal, and stepped outside to find Quinn and Tyler already at work on her wagon. "Good morning," Quinn called, pausing his work. "Coffee's hot if you want some." Josephine poured herself a cup, savoring the bitter warmth. "Is there anything I can do to help?" "You could sort through what's left in your wagon," Quinn suggested. "See what's salvageable." The task proved disheartening. Most of her belongings had been taken, leaving only a few books, some cooking utensils, a sewing kit, and a trunk containing linens and 2 spare dresses. At the bottom of the trunk, she found a small portrait of her parents, the only reminder of her former life. "Not much left," she admitted when Quinn approached. "It's more than some have when starting over," he replied. "Besides, possessions can be replaced, courage can't." His words warmed her more than the Arizona sun. "You think I'm courageous." "I think you survived what would have broken many," Quinn said simply. "That's the definition of courage in my book." As the day progressed, Josephine insisted on making herself useful, preparing meals and tidying the cabin. By evening, Tyler had fashioned a new wheel and was working on reinforcing the axle. "Should be roadworthy by tomorrow afternoon," he announced before departing. After supper, Quinn and Josephine sat on the porch, watching darkness claim the landscape. The vastness of the star-filled sky made Josephine feel simultaneously insignificant and free. "Have you thought about what you'll do next?" Quinn asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "I don't know," Josephine admitted. "I have no family left, no destination that calls to me." "Silverwood needs a teacher," Quinn reminded her. "The town council's been trying to establish a proper school for months. And where would I live? How would I support myself until such arrangements were made?" Quinn cleared his throat. "I've got a proposition for you, Miss Morgan." "It's not charity," he added quickly, "but an arrangement that could benefit us both." Josephine turned to him, curious. "There's a small cabin on the edge of my property. It was here when I bought the land belonged to a prospector who moved on to California. It needs work, but it could be a suitable place for a single lady teacher. You could stay there, help establish the school, and in return—" He hesitated. "In return," she prompted. "I could use help managing things here, keeping accounts corresponding with the territorial government. Being sheriff doesn't leave much time for running a ranch properly." Josephine considered his offer. It was practical, respectful of her independence, and gave her purpose. "I'd like to see this cabin first," she said cautiously. The next day after breakfast, Quinn took Josephine to see the prospector's cabin. It was small but sturdy, with a stone fireplace similar to Quinn's and a front porch that faced east toward the mountains. Inside, dust covered every surface, and a family of mice had clearly made themselves at home. "It needs work," Quinn acknowledged, "but the roof is sound and the walls are strong." Josephine walked the perimeter, mentally cataloging what would be needed. "Why have you kept it empty all this time?" Quinn looked away. "Always thought I might find someone who needed it someday." By afternoon, Tyler had completed the repairs on Josephine's wagon. "Good as new," he declared proudly, "maybe better." Quinn paid him generously, waving away Tyler's protests. "You did fine work, Jenkins, worth every cent." As Tyler departed, Josephine approached her repaired wagon with mixed emotions. It represented both her means of escape and a reminder of recent trauma. "So," Quinn said, removing his hat and running a hand through his sandy hair, "have you decided? Will you stay or continue west?" Josephine took a deep breath. "I'll stay at least long enough to see if I can make a place for myself here." Relief visibly washed over Quinn's features. "You won't regret it. Silverwood has good people once you get to know them." Over the next week, Quinn and Josephine established a routine. During the day, while Quinn attended to his sheriff duties, Josephine began cleaning and repairing the smaller cabin. In the evenings, they shared meals and conversation, gradually revealing more of themselves to each other. Josephine learned that Quinn had lost his family during the war, his parents to illness and his younger brother in battle. "We fought on opposite sides," he admitted one night, his voice heavy with old grief. "I was Union, he chose Confederate. Our parents died while we were both away. By the time I learned he'd fallen at Gettysburg, it was too late for goodbyes." "Is that why you came west?" Josephine asked softly. "To escape those memories?" Quinn stared into the fire. "Partly, but also to find something worth building, not destroying." He looked up at her. "What about you? What dreams did you have before life intervened?" Josephine considered the question. "I always wanted to teach, to help shape young minds, but I also dreamed of having my own family someday." She smiled sadly. My mother used to say I had too many books and not enough bows. Books last longer than most bows, Quinn observed with a small smile. Is that why you have so many? Josephine gestured to his collection. Words are companions that don't demand much but give plenty in return. By the end of the second week, the prospector's cabin was habitable. Quinn had repaired the window shutters and door, while Josephine had scrubbed every surface and arranged her meager possessions inside. They celebrated with a special dinner, and Quinn presented her with a housewarming gift, a handcrafted rocking chair. Every teacher needs somewhere comfortable to read, he explained somewhat sheepishly. The following day, Quinn took Josephine into Silverwood proper for the first time. The town was larger than she expected, a main street lined with businesses, several side streets with residences, and a church whose steeple dominated the skyline. Silver was discovered in the hills 10 years ago, Quinn explained as they rode in her wagon. The booms slowed, but enough people stayed to build something lasting. Their first stop was the Mercantile, where Quinn introduced Josephine to the proprietors, Elias and Martha Wilson. Sheriff Rodgers tells us you might be our new teacher, Martha said warmly, clasping Josephine's hands. What a blessing! We have 15 children of school age with no formal education. Nothing's been decided yet, Quinn cautioned. Miss Morgan is still settling in. Where are you staying, dear? Martha asked. Quinn Sheriff Rodgers has generously offered the use of a cabin on his property, Josephine explained. Martha's eyebrows rose slightly, but she merely smiled. How thoughtful. Well, you must join us for Sunday dinner this week. Meet some of the families whose children you'll be teaching. As they continued their tour, Josephine noticed the respectful way townspeople greeted Quinn. He clearly commanded admiration beyond the authority of his badge. Their final stop was the town hall, where Quinn introduced Josephine to Mayor Frederick Harrington, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and a neat mustache. Miss Morgan, your arrival is most fortuitous, the mayor declared after hearing Quinn's explanation. We've set aside funds for a teacher's salary and have been using the church for children's lessons, but what we need is someone with proper educational training. I taught for 3 years in Illinois, Josephine confirmed. I have references, though they are back east. Your word and Sheriff Rodgers' recommendation are sufficient for now, Mayor Harrington assured her. When can you start? Josephine glanced at Quinn, who nodded encouragingly. Next Monday, she suggested. That would give me time to prepare lessons and materials. Excellent. The position pays $30 monthly with additional compensation for supplies. The mayor extended his hand to seal the agreement. As they left town, Josephine felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Everything's happening so quickly, she murmured, having second thoughts. Quinn asked, his expression concerned. No, just overwhelmed. 2 weeks ago I was being sold like property, and now I'm responsible for educating an entire town's children. Quinn's hand covered hers briefly. You're not alone, Josephine, you have friends here now. The way he said her name the first time he'd used it instead of Miss Morgan sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. The Sunday dinner at the Wilsons' home introduced Josephine to many of Silverwood's families. Martha had arranged for parents to bring their school-aged children, giving Josephine the opportunity to meet her future pupils. They ranged from 6-year-old twins with matching mischievous grins to a serious 15-year-old boy who explained he wanted to learn mathematics to help with his father's store. Throughout the gathering, Josephine noticed Quinn watching her interact with the townspeople. His quiet pride was evident, as though her success was personally important to him. On Monday morning, Quinn drove Josephine to the church in her wagon, now loaded with books, slates, and other teaching materials purchased with the town's education fund. Nervous? He asked as they approached. Terrified, she admitted. But the good kind of terrified, Quinn smiled. You'll be magnificent. As children began arriving with their parents, Quinn prepared to leave. I should get to the office, plenty of sheriff duties waiting. Josephine caught his arm. Thank you, Quinn, for everything. His eyes softened. Just passing along kindness, remember? That first day of teaching exhausted but exhilarated Josephine. The children's eagerness to learn touched her deeply, even when their enthusiasm occasionally manifested as restlessness. By afternoon, she had assessed their various levels and begun organizing them into groups based on ability rather than age. When Quinn arrived to drive her home, she chattered excitedly about her pupils, their potential, and her plans for their education. Quinn listened attentively, occasionally asking questions that revealed his genuine interest. "You found your purpose today," he observed as they approached their cabins in the golden light of sunset. "I can see it in your eyes." Josephine realized he was right. For the first time since her parents' deaths, she felt anchored, useful, connected to something larger than her grief. Weeks passed, falling into a comfortable pattern. Each morning, Quinn would drive Josephine to the church-turned schoolhouse and collect her in the afternoon. Evenings were spent sharing meals and conversation, often extending into discussions of books they both had read. On Saturdays, they worked together maintaining the property, Quinn handling physical repairs while Josephine managed correspondences and accounts. As autumn approached, bringing cooler temperatures to the Arizona territory, Josephine found herself increasingly aware of Quinn's presence. The way his hand sometimes lingered when helping her into the wagon, how his eyes sought hers across a room. The quiet pride in his voice when introducing her to others as "our teacher." One Saturday in late September, Quinn suggested they ride into the hills. "There's something I want to show you," he explained, saddling 2 horses. "A place that's special to me." The ride took them higher into the foothills, through stands of juniper and pine. After an hour, they reached a small plateau overlooking the valley. A natural spring created a pool of clear water, surrounded by wildflowers that had somehow thrived despite the season. "It's beautiful," Josephine breathed, dismounting. "I found it my first year here," Quinn said, securing the horses. "Come here when I need to think clearly or make important decisions." They sat beside the pool, sharing the lunch Josephine had packed. The intimacy of the setting, isolated from the demands of their daily lives, created a space where words flowed more freely. "Are you happy here, Josephine?" Quinn asked suddenly. She considered the question seriously. "I am, more than I expected to be after everything that happened." "And the teaching, the children, they're wonderful. Challenging sometimes, but so rewarding," Quinn nodded, seemingly reassured. "And, living on my property, that arrangement is still satisfactory." Josephine studied him, sensing deeper currents beneath his careful questions. "It's more than satisfactory. I feel safe there, respected." "Just respected?" Quinn asked, his voice dropping slightly. Josephine's heart quickened. "What else should I feel, Sheriff Rodgers?" Quinn reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I was hoping, perhaps, that you might have come to feel something more, as I have." Time seemed suspended as Josephine absorbed his words. She had known, somewhere in her heart, that their relationship was evolving beyond friendship, but hearing him acknowledge it made it suddenly, thrillingly real. "I have," she admitted softly, "though I wasn't sure if you." Quinn's hand cupped her cheek. "Josephine Morgan, from the moment I saw you standing beside that broken wagon, something inside me recognized you, not just as someone needing help, but as someone I'd been waiting for without knowing it." Josephine placed her hand over his. "I was so afraid that day. Of what would happen to me, of who might buy me. And then you appeared, and somehow I knew I could trust you, even before you spoke." "May I kiss you?" Quinn asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Instead of answering, Josephine leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative with newfound discovery, then deepened as Quinn's arms encircled her, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for weeks." "Why didn't you?" she murmured. "I needed you to feel completely free. To know that your place here, your job, your home, none of it depended on returning my feelings." His consideration touched her deeply. So many men would have presumed, would have leveraged their position of power. But Quinn had given her time, space, and genuine choice. The ride back to the ranch was filled with new awareness-shy glances, occasional touches, and a sense of possibility that hummed between them like electricity before a storm. As autumn deepened into winter, Josephine and Quinn's relationship blossomed. They maintained propriety in public. Quinn was still the sheriff after all, and Josephine the town's teacher, but privately acknowledged their deepening feelings for each other. Christmas brought Silverwood's first proper school pageant, with Josephine's pupils performing recitations and carols for the entire community. Quinn sat in the front row, his face alight with pride as Josephine directed the children through their presentations. At the celebration afterward, Mayor Harrington approached them, beaming. "Miss Morgan, you've transformed our educational prospects. The territorial governor himself has written to commend our initiative." "The children deserve the credit," Josephine replied modestly. "They've worked incredibly hard. Nevertheless, the town council wishes to express our gratitude." The mayor presented her with an envelope. "A bonus with our compliments and authorization to begin planning for a dedicated schoolhouse in the spring." Later that evening, as they sat before the fire in Quinn's cabin, Josephine opened her gift from him, a beautiful leather-bound journal with her initials embossed on the cover. "For recording your thoughts," Quinn explained, "or perhaps writing that book you mentioned wanting to create someday." "It's perfect," she whispered, running her fingers over the supple leather. "I have something for you too." She handed him a package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue wool that matched his eyes, and a framed pencil drawing she had created of his cabin at sunrise. "Josephine," he breathed, studying the detailed artwork, "I had no idea you could draw like this." "There's still much we're learning about each other," she replied with a smile. Quinn set the gifts aside and took her hands in his. "Which brings me to something I've been wanting to ask you." He looked uncharacteristically nervous. "These past months have been the happiest of my life. Having you here, watching you build something meaningful with the school, coming home to your company each evening, it's shown me what life could be." Josephine's heart began racing as she realized where his words were leading. "I know it hasn't been that long," Quinn continued, "but some things don't need time to be certain. I love you, Josephine Morgan. I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Tears filled Josephine's eyes. "Are you asking me to marry you, Quinn Rodgers?" "I am," he confirmed, producing a small ring from his pocket, a simple silver band set with a single pearl. "It was my mother's. I've carried it with me since leaving home, never thinking I'd find someone worthy of wearing it, until you." Josephine extended her trembling hand. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." As Quinn slipped the ring onto her finger, Josephine reflected on how differently her journey west had ended than she'd expected. Instead of San Francisco, she'd found home in a small Arizona town. Instead of continuing her uncle's ambitions, she discovered her own purpose. And instead of the loneliness she'd feared after being left alone in the world, she'd found a love that promised to sustain her for a lifetime. The wedding took place the following spring, just as the desert bloomed with unexpected color. The entire town turned out for the celebration, with Mayor Harrington officiating the ceremony on the newly constructed schoolhouse, steps a fitting location given how central education had become to Silverwood's identity, largely thanks to Josephine's efforts. Martha Wilson helped Josephine prepare, lending her a veil that had been in her family for generations. "Something borrowed," she explained with a wink. As Josephine walked toward Quinn, who waited with barely contained emotion, she thought of that broken wagon wheel that had seemingly marked the lowest point in her life. How could she have known then that it would lead her to this moment, to this man, to this future full of promise? Quinn's voice was steady as he spoke his vows, promising to cherish, protect, and support Josephine for all his days. When he slipped a gold band alongside her mother's pearl ring, he whispered words meant only for her. both fixed now. Their first year of marriage brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Quinn continued his work as sheriff, occasionally requiring him to be away tracking outlaws or attending territorial court sessions. Josephine balanced teaching with establishing their home, turning the main cabin into a warm haven that reflected both their personalities. In early winter, Josephine discovered she was expecting their first child. Quinn's reaction, tears of joy followed by anxious planning for the baby's arrival, endeared him to her even more deeply. "I never thought I'd have a family again," he confessed one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "After losing everyone during the war, I convinced myself I was meant to be alone." "And now?" Josephine asked, threading her fingers through his. "Now I understand that loss teaches us to appreciate love more deeply when we find it again," Quinn replied. "I'll never take you or our child for granted." The following summer brought the birth of their daughter, Elizabeth Ann Rodgers, named for both their mothers. Quinn proved to be a devoted father, proudly carrying the infant around town and installing a cradle in the sheriff's office so Josephine could teach while he watched the baby during quieter days. As Elizabeth grew from infant to toddler, the territory around them changed as well. Arizona moved closer to statehood, bringing increased settlement and development. Quinn was offered a position with the territorial marshals, a promotion that recognized his reputation for fairness and integrity, but declined, preferring to remain in the community they'd helped build. "My life is here," he explained when Josephine questioned his decision. "Our life." By the time Elizabeth turned 3, the schoolhouse had expanded to accommodate Silverwood's growing population. Josephine hired an assistant teacher, allowing her to focus on the older students while maintaining time for her family. That spring, Quinn surprised Josephine by beginning construction on a new house larger than their cabin, with separate bedrooms, a dedicated study, and a spacious kitchen. "We're outgrowing our current home," he explained when showing her the plans. "Especially with another little one on the way." Josephine's hand flew to her stomach. "How did you know? I was planning to tell you tonight," Quinn grinned. "You've been craving pickles with breakfast, just like with Elizabeth. Some things a husband notices." Their son, James Quinn Rodgers, was born as their new home was completed, a synchronicity that felt like a blessing. The family moved in during a community barn-raising style event, with townspeople helping transport furniture and Martha Wilson organizing a house-warming celebration. As Josephine rocked James to sleep that first night in their new bedroom, she gazed out the window at the stars arcing across the Arizona sky. Quinn entered quietly, Elizabeth drowsing against his shoulder. "Happy?" he asked softly. Josephine nodded, too full of emotion to speak immediately. Finally, she whispered, "I was thinking about that day at the auction, how close I came to a completely different fate." Quinn settled Elizabeth in her bed before joining Josephine by the window. "Providence has strange ways," he observed. "If not for that broken wagon wheel, we might never have met." "Sometimes things need to break before they can be properly fixed," Josephine replied, leaning into his embrace. In the years that followed, the Rodgers family continued to grow and thrive alongside Silverwood itself. Quinn eventually transitioned from sheriff to judge as the legal system in Arizona Territory became more established. Josephine developed a reputation as one of the region's finest educators, eventually writing a series of educational texts used throughout the Western Territories. Their children grew strong and capable in the freedom of the frontier, inheriting Quinn's sense of justice and Josephine's love of learning. Elizabeth eventually became a doctor, one of Arizona's first female physicians, while James followed his father into law. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the town honored Quinn and Josephine with a celebration that recognized their contributions to Silverwood's development. Mayor Wilson, Elias having succeeded Frederick Harrington years earlier, presented them with a commemorative plaque for the schoolhouse, which now bore Josephine's name. That evening, after the festivities concluded, Quinn took Josephine for a drive in a beautifully restored wagon, the very same one that had stood broken beside her all those years ago. "You kept it all this time?" she asked, surprised and touched. Quinn nodded, helping her up to the seat. "Some things are worth preserving, even when they're broken. They remind us of where we started." The wagon carried them to their special place by the spring in the hills, now accessible by a proper road. Despite the silver in their hair and the lines earned through years of laughter and occasional sorrow, they looked at each other with the same tenderness that had blossomed during their courtship. "When I said we would fix both that day at the auction, I never imagined how completely my own life would be repaired in the process," Quinn admitted, taking her hands in his. "We fixed each other," Josephine replied softly, "and built something neither of us could have created alone." As the sun set over Silverwood, painting the desert in gold and crimson, Quinn and Josephine Rodgers held each other close, grateful for the broken wheel that had led them to wholeness, the chance meeting that had become destiny, and the love that had transformed two damaged souls into something enduring and beautiful. In the decades that followed, their story became part of Silverwood's folklore, the sheriff who rescued a woman being sold beside a broken cart, promising to fix both. Long after they were gone, townspeople would point out the Rodgers homestead to newcomers, explaining how a single act of decency in a harsh land had created a legacy of compassion and education that continued to shape generations. For Quinn and Josephine, however, the true miracle was simpler. In a vast and often unforgiving wilderness, they had found in each other not just repair, but renewal, not just a mending of what was broken, but the creation of something stronger and more beautiful than either had dared to imagine possible.